Welcome to The Fine Print, a podcast where experts at Succession Resource Group unpack the latest industry trends, recommendations, and observations for independent advisors managing their practice with no fluff and hopefully a little entertainment. In each episode, we'll discuss ways in which you can understand and leverage the value of your business, grow your business through M&A, but also through an optimized organizational structure. Improve and protect your business to create a sustainable enterprise that can hopefully outlast you. And lastly, preparing for your eventual retirement and how to maximize that result. We're not just tackling high-level concepts, hence the title. We're getting into the details, or the fine print. So, we encourage you to listen in with whatever beverage suits your preference, and let's get to the forefront of industry trends with a fresh perspective to help you achieve your long-term business goals.
Compensation. It's one of those topics we want to know more about because it's something that every business has or will struggle with. And if you aren't struggling with it, you probably aren't trying hard enough. Well, David Grau doesn't shy away from any topic, even one as challenging as compensation. I'm Patrice Sikora. David, M&A activity has continued to evolve and change, and you're on the forefront of that. But if you had to name one other major change you've seen in the industry, what would it be?
Yeah, it's a good question because you're right. Mergers and acquisitions, succession planning has had major changes over the last 10 or 20 years. But the other big one, I would say, and it's kind of related to our topic for today, compensation, and even the stuff that we eat, sleep, and breathe, and that is mergers and acquisitions. It is the evolution of the practice to a business in our industry. We're sort of seeing this fork in the road where folks are opting out of getting stuck in the middle, which we love to see because that's not a great place to be in any business, in any industry, opting for either A, the lifestyle practice. It is lean, it is mean, it is uber efficient, and it is built to their lifestyle. It could be literally a solopreneur all by themselves doing a great job for 60, 70, 80 households, high net worth individuals typically. Or it is the other side, building the enterprise, where they are empire builders. And there's certainly not as many of those as a percentage, but there is a surprising number of folks that when you look at those two options, they almost find that they've had enough success that they didn't realize they even headed down the right fork in the road, and they're focused on building an enterprise now, where really they realized they had gotten away from being a lifestyle practice, but I don't think until they really paused and looked up that they realized, oh, shoot, I'm kind of a part-time CEO. This is a legitimate business. And sometimes they're excited about that prospect. Other times, frankly, all of us at certain moments, they have this, oh shit moment, like, uh-oh, this is not what I set out to do, but you know what? It's kind of working. And I feel like I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. So biggest change is that fork in the road is folks being very intentional about building a lifestyle practice or a true enterprise. And out of that, you start to see things start to shape up like job descriptions. As you start to build an enterprise or even a lifestyle practice, frankly, with a couple key roles, we're starting to see this evolution of even lifestyle practice starting to look a little bit and run a little bit more like a business. Simple one, mind you, intentionally, but still a business where they have a job description. As you start to have a couple of job descriptions, you back up and squint your eyes. That starts to look a little bit like an org chart. So they put together an org chart. You have an org chart, and you start to have different people in these different positions. And as you grow out of that lifestyle practice into the enterprise, they start to end up having specialists. They get away from these generalists of trying to go out there and hire somebody who can source business, they can service business, and they can manage the investments. They're basically looking for themselves just 10 or 20 years ago, which is every now and then, don't get me wrong, they find somebody, but even a broke clock is right twice a day. It's not a great way to try to scale a business. And so we're starting to see these businesses now, as they create their job descriptions, they're starting to grow and they need more size and scale. They're creating specialists. Well, now all of a sudden we have a more narrow job description. It's a little easier to hire and train for that. And as a result, then bringing it all full circle, really helping support all of these efforts and initiatives and changes is the compensation. Getting away from grid-based pay for performance to a more sustainable living wage that, frankly, I think people coming out of college would even start to get excited about. And we haven't seen that in this industry ever.
Where do they go for guidance on how to put this together? Where do they know where to start when it comes to compensation?
Ooh, that is a tough one, honestly. I mean, this is also coming from the seat as a fellow business owner. Like, compensation is tough. It's not easy. It's not something you want to mess with. You don't want to get it wrong. And not just selfishly because you want to win as a business, but because generally when you have people and you have them for any length of time, you start to build relationships, whether you meant to or not. I mean, they become important people, certainly in your professional life, if not personal as well, but they do impact even the personal life. So it's important to make sure that you get guidance and support. So they'll do research. We'll see them go to places like Investment News. Investment News and the Moss Adams compensation study has been done for years. It's a good place to start in terms of calibrating a compensation plan or figuring out how much to pay somebody. The FPA has put out some great resources. There is a very small number, at least from what I have seen, and I've actively sought this out. And I go to a lot of conferences and we work with a lot of broker dealers and custodians and coaches. There's just not a lot of support on developing a compensation plan from somebody who knows what they're doing. Like, they have done this enough. They have the compensation research to help provide informed opinions. So there's a handful of consultants out there. I would tell you, Patrice, we only do it because it is so impactful to the other work that we do on succession planning and building a valuable business that it was almost painful to watch it come through the door on the valuation side of people getting this stuff. I don't say wrong, but for now, let's just call a spade a spade.
Wrong.
It's wrong, or it's suboptimal for what they're trying to build. It's incongruent where they're trying to build an ensemble enterprise team and they're paying people like solo siloed advisors, and then they get frustrated with the results, which is understandable. So honestly, I tell you, probably 90% of the compensation plans I see out there are homegrown. Like, it's trial and error, like so many of us. And then the other 10% work with a firm like ours or one of the other consultants out there, but there's just not a lot of support.
I can see someone from a firm that, as you say, did it homegrown, suddenly looking across the fence and thinking, wow, I could do that over there. I mean, it's,
right?
You're opening the door to them leaving.
It really is. That's why compensation is such a tough thing, that messing with it could lead to you either, not getting candidates that you wanted because it's not competitive. It could lead to you overpaying somebody, also not really great long-term, certainly not sustainable. It could cause you to lose key team members that you don't want to lose, but also not changing it can cause you all of those same heartaches. So it's one of those things where I get why people are, cautious, why they don't want to mess with it. And frankly, it's an investment in the business that the owner is making when they bring on, let's say, that first staff person, which is generally one of the hardest, because you go from, just yourself to then deciding, I will take less money home next month and I'll give it to somebody else who next month will contribute nothing to the firm. In fact, will take time away from me and I'll have less money as a result. So it's getting those hires on board, being able to scale the business. That stuff is just really, really hard. And compensation is one of those things that it feels like as business owners, we're talking about it all the time. But when you go back to the fact that the employees, your professionals on your team, are the lifeblood of the business, it's kind of hard to not shine a spotlight on it and have to keep looking at it and talking about it. But if you do the compensation plan right, yes, you may revisit it, annually, like every firm does. But eventually you hopefully get it to a point where you got things in balance, it's working well, and it's just small tweaks and adjustments. And that is fine. You're not always going to get it right, but there's always next year.
Well, keep going. Keep talking about, why does a compensation plan matter?
So, it's that old cliche saying that compensation drives behavior in anything. You think about even just your children. As much as we hate to do it, like, I will pay you to do chores. It's called an allowance. I'll pay you to read.
Yep.
You can figure out what your currency is in your household, whether it's, earning screen time or whatever it might be. But it is one of those things that in a business, it will drive the outcomes that you are looking for, whether you meant for it to or not. So it drives how an advisory firm services clients. When I give my key team members compensation that is grid-based, for example, it's a percentage of GDC, a percentage of revenue, and then I give them some clients, and then I give them bonuses based on bringing in new business, I can't be surprised when they don't focus on tending to the current stable of clients and they go focus on prospecting, because that's how the compensation plan was set up. So it is really, really important because, number one, it does drive behaviors. Number two, when you bring those team members in, their job is to understand the compensation system and then try to maximize it, which is a nice way of saying sort of game the system, take advantage of it.
Yeah.
You build it, they work within the confines of it, which means we have to be very intentional and sort of forward looking, making sure that this thing will work and it will scale with the business. So, there are a lot of firms, we see this in the valuations again a lot, where the owners are paying the employees better than the owners, not more, but better. I mean, what is true in all firms for us as owners is we might get paid the most sometimes, but we always get paid last. When you see these grid-based or GDC-based firms that are paying their people that way, they're getting paid right off the top, percentage of top line revenue. If I had to pick, like, would I rather have my 100% of the bottom line or 30% of the top line with no headaches? I'll take the 30% off the top, please and thank you. Yeah. Which you think, okay, well, it's fine, but eventually they're going to become a partner and they're going to shift to being focused on the bottom line. Yeah, but when that day comes and we offer them the opportunity to shift to being an owner and buying in and getting a percentage of the bottom line, you can't be terribly surprised when you talk to 3 or 4 of them and only 1 or 2 raise their hand, because the rest of them make a good living. They don't have any headaches. And conceptually, they get paid better and simpler than the owners. That makes our job on succession planning really hard.
Yeah. But when you say compensation, do you include benefits?
Yes. The funny thing is the benefit conversation, even that one has continued to broaden. Think back to when I was starting in this business, or just as a professional in general. When you said benefits, we all knew what that meant. That was your vacation time, your sick time, your healthcare, medical, dental, vision.
Yeah, that's it.
That was it. Now you look at these benefits packages and you're oftentimes having to build benefits packages that include, not even vacation and sick time. Like that, even saying that feels antiquated. Like now we've got PTO and unlimited PTO or flexible PTO, whatever you want to call it, but where you just take time off and you can work on getting it approved, but you don't have, like, you didn't accrue 20 hours this year. Like, you just take the time off you want. You've got compensation reimbursement. You've got flexible work schedules where you don't have to come into the office 3 days a week. Like, the benefits package, it is still those basics for sure, but it's also now gone beyond that, where we're oftentimes helping people build phantom equity sharing plans, the educational reimbursement stuff. It hasn't gotten out of hand, but it has definitely gotten more complicated, even on something as simple as benefits.
But something like that would seem to me, that would tell me that the firm is looking to the future. I want you to improve yourself and be here for me.
Oh, yes, undoubtedly. And it's kind of funny because when we propose this to firms, because again, the benefit of, I think, working with us is we use form contracts. It gives us the ability to sort of look at the menu. Here's what other folks are doing around the benefits, for example, since we talked about that. They can see it and say, oh, great, educational reimbursement for, get your CFP or your CFA or whatever designation it is that we feel is important for the role that you are in. We will help cover your study materials. We will even cover your testing fee for the first time. And when you get it, we'll even provide you a one-time bonus of, $5,000 for getting your CFP, for example. That's not crazy. And then they see the next paragraph that we have in ours that talks about, and if you leave within the 24 months following the occurrence of all these things,
yes,
and they think, oh, well, yeah, that's right. I knew somebody who just did this for their team member, and then the person left and they were not super excited about it. So it's those things that, frankly, just, I hate to say it, but through trial and error over the years of having done this as a business owner and also working with clients, you take your lumps, but then you work on improving the deliverables for the client. So even things like that, yes, every owner wants to invest in their team. And I will butcher the saying, but there's a great saying out there on, CEO talking to the CFO, talking about what if we invest in our people and they leave? That's obviously the CFO talking to the CEO, and the CEO says, what if we don't and they stay?
Ooh, I like that.
Right? Like,
Oh, yes.
hopefully it'll make us all feel better when we pay, for the education for these people. And then they do a few years later leave. It still sucks. But what if they stay?
Yes. Yes. Well, okay. What trends have you been seeing regarding compensation and advisors recently?
I wouldn't say it has been an analog switch, but we have seen a pretty major shift, especially in the larger enterprise firms that, they're on the other side of this. They have achieved scale, they're doing great, they have redundancies, in different roles, they've got coverage in a robust organizational chart. They have all but left sort of the grid-based, the GDC-based compensation model and shifted to our framing for it. It takes lots of different shapes. Is we call it our BBP, base bonus profits. There is a base salary. There is a bonus. Obviously, bonus is pretty self-explanatory. And then there is profits. The base varies. I mean, if you look at it as I'll put them into two groups, farmers and hunters. Farmers service their operations. They're professionals in many cases, but they may also, manage the money, but they are not hunters. And I think hunters are pretty self-explanatory. Their job is business development, cultivate new clients, centers of influence, go out, do the radio show, do the seminars. Lots of firms, until they get that size and scale, they'll have kind of a hybrid, which makes the compensation a little bit harder, but still doable. But when you get to the size and scale and you can start really having people who you can just identify, you may not be a great hunter, but you are a really, really good farmer. And if I can get 5 or 6 good farmers in here for every great hunter, their hunter's job is just to bring them in and fill up the farmer's bucket of time. And then we'll bring in another one, we'll train them up. In that model, compensation for a farmer, for example, might have 70, 80% of their total comp, benefits aside, coming from the base.
Mm-hmm.
But you do still have a little bit of a bonus, for example, where the farmer's bonus might come from, if it's investment related, it's based on the investment portfolio performance. If it is based on a service professional, it might be surveys back from the clients, how they're doing. It might be uncovering new additional investable assets from the existing households. It is not for going and sourcing new business. You are a farmer. A, you're not good at it. B, you are really good at servicing the clients. I want to focus your time and effort there. And that if you are wildly successful, here's what that could mean for your compensation. As opposed to like a hunter, I want to give you a livable base, but I want to make sure that you have unlimited upside. That if you can go out there and you can shake trees, go elephant hunting, great. Why would I have you spend any of your time sitting in front of clients when I can pay somebody $60, $70 an hour maybe for that? I can't get a hunter to do it for that kind of money. So we're seeing a lot more specialization in that base bonus profits calibrated for the location and the role works really, really well, because that P part, the profit, is what sort of helps bring it all together. You've got the base for doing the job. You got the bonus for going above and beyond and to reward the individual. The profit is sort of your holistic measure of success. It's tied to the firm. It could be, it could be literally profit as in like they get to be an owner, maybe non-voting shares. It could be an LTIP, a long-term incentive plan, i.e. invested bonus program. It could just be annual profit sharing that you do discretionary. We don't have to overcomplicate or over-engineer anything, but usually that combination of the base, bonus, and profits, it's what we're seeing industry-wide when you back up and squint your eyes. That's where most of them seem to be at or headed.
Let's bring this full circle to what you do, valuations. Does an IRA's compensation plan impact the value of their business?
100%, one way or the other. The value of an RIA is directly impacted by the compensation. It is the largest expense for a big firm, a small firm. It does not matter. Your professional staff, your employees, team members, or contractors, they are in aggregate almost every business owner's largest expense in the professional services space. So when you peel that back then and say, okay, well, what if we did group them into so that base bonus profits where it is less tied to GDC or revenue or grid-based compensation, or the firm that pays their team members effectively all that way, but for maybe like the admin or ops people, when you take a look at the valuation, those that are paying their professionals on a grid-based payout, like a percentage of revenue, that is, if you think of a manufacturing firm, for example, it is the equivalent of your cost of goods sold. It comes right off the top before we get into looking at actual like gross profits. So valuation, it does the same thing. If I am a $10 million firm and I have $300,000 that I pay my professional staff on a grid, then really we're starting the valuation with a $7 million firm.
Got it.
As opposed to if we can do something, some version of that base bonus profits, when the firm goes from 10 million in revenue to 20, we don't see a direct scaling of the compensation. And the problem is in these sort of historical old school GDC based or revenue based grid systems, when the firm doubles in size, the compensation doesn't even double in size. That would have been nice. The problem is when it goes from 10 to 20 million, the producers get credit for that and they want a higher payout. So it almost actually starts to feel like you're paying taxes. And we all know how, us business owners feel about quarterly estimateds. Like it starts to feel like taxes where the more I make, the more I pay, both as a percentage and the dollar amount. And not only does that hurt just as a business owner, from a valuation standpoint, to go back to your core of your question, the value of the business, you will watch these two businesses and they will separate further and further. And when your goal is to build an enterprise, you may never get to a point where you want to take on like private equity. But I mean, the difference in value can start to be millions of dollars. Even, we're not talking about huge firms, just large firms. It's a big difference.
A potential buyer looking at a firm and the way you've talked about valuation here, the different parts of it, different aspects of it. Have you experienced a potential buyer coming in and saying, I want this, but I need to tweak this compensation plan?
It does happen a lot. And it's funny that you asked that without us being planning to talk about that, because it does come up in deals. Because when anybody's buying a business, again, it could be a business with $1 million in revenue. It could be a business with 5 million in revenue, or 10 million. It doesn't really matter. When you're buying a business, it comes with clients, of course, which sounds great. It comes with assets under management, which generates revenue, all good things. Problem is most buyers, they aren't sitting around on a ton of excess capacity. They are staffed appropriately. They might have a little bit room for growth for sure. But what they're looking to do is certainly acquire the business. But from a scalability perspective, they like to pick up a couple of key staff people in this process, which will then let us not only retain the clients, but also be able to service them short-term and long-term.
Right.
Well, that sounds great. But if it turns out you haven't gone through and you haven't done the compensation studies and you haven't recalibrated, it gets really hard for a buyer to come in and say, well, Patrice, I'd love to buy your business. I think we have a ton of great chemistry. I think we both agree on that. But I'd like to pick up, your two key personnel that are client facing. But we do the compensation studies. I do the research. I do benchmark, and I've got a pretty well thought out compensation plan. And my people are maybe slightly overpaid. Your people are paid 20% more than they are. Now I want to retain them, but I'd have to bring them over and give them a pretty hefty pay cut. And it's what I'm going to have to do, because if they go anywhere else, they're going to experience the same thing. Unfortunately, I want to retain them, but now they're going to have kind of a bad taste in their mouth, starting with me. So all the more reason, whether you're on the buy side, the sell side, if you do nothing else, just at least start benchmarking this stuff. And there's good resources out there, but a lot of the benchmarking information that is out there industry wide is based on 200 or 300 surveys, which sounds good. 200 or 300 is not terrible. But the problem is when you start looking and saying, okay, well, let's go to the upper end. Say it was 300 survey respondents for some of the biggest industry studies. Well, really, I don't want to know what a paraplanner gets paid in the United States. I want to know what a paraplanner gets paid in California. And really, there's some pretty big disparity in and around California. I'd really like to know what they get paid in San Diego. Well, now all of a sudden, you're 300 with just that, not even looking at designations. We're down to a sample size of 5. And that can really skew the data. So really important to benchmark, but do it with a couple of different sources and make sure you know how big that sample size is, because some of the industry resources aren't quite as useful when you drill down to that level of specificity, which is pretty much what everybody does.
All right, David, recommendations regarding compensation. What are some best practices that you see?
Never assume that you have got it right. I think that's a good place to start. Always come back, always revisit it. I mean, and it's one of those things when you get together with other business owners, you can start to have some of these conversations, but it's compensation. You never want to feel like you are wanting to pay your people less, but at the end of the day, you do want to pay them fairly. And of course, how you view the definition of paying them fairly and how the employee views being paid fairly, they're always going to be at odds. It's just the nature of the beast. But benchmark periodically. And by periodically, I mean at least annually. As you start to do it, whether you work with a firm like ours or somebody else, it actually does get easier. It gets faster. You'll feel better about it because now we're just recalibrating a system. But I would say come back to it periodically. And going back to where we started on sort of the split, the fork in the road, is if you want to build sort of your own mini broker dealer, OSJ, sort of RIA, that's that hub and spoke where the RIA is the back office and then the producers are out there in the field doing their own thing. There, grid-based, GDC-based compensation works fantastic. If you are trying to build an ensemble team, like an actual team, capital T, then you're going to have to look at shifting away at some point, either with current staff members gradually, or at least with the next new staff members, shifting to some version of that base bonus and profit. And with that comes the ability to then start focusing on hiring specialists. And that's something where we're already seeing that industry wide, but the more you can focus on specialists, the easier it is going to be to hire for, the more you're going to be able to dial that compensation plan in. You think back to like your first hire for most of us. Your first hire is usually like an admin. If all I need them to do is pick the phone up and make sure they get back to clients as I onboard them, that's a pretty easy job. I could do it, but I don't have time to do it all. So I go hire for that very narrow skill set. And it costs me $25 an hour, 50-something thousand dollars a year. Okay, that's manageable. Well, as we start looking for farmers, I just need someone who can service clients. There are a ton of those people out there. And as you can stockpile these farmers, usually 1 or 2 of them out of a group of, 5 or 6, they'll show some soft skills for, selling and closing. It may not be like us as entrepreneurs, but you can start to really build these things up. So anyway, I would go back to figure out ultimately what it is you are trying to build. If you want to build a lifestyle practice, then just keep it really, really simple, but you're still going to have some of these conversations and problems from time to time. If you're focused on building the enterprise, do the organizational planning, get the compensation models set up, get the job descriptions and your org chart done, not for where you are today, but for where you want to end up.
Right.
And I've seen these folks do these org charts with us, and you can tell they're skeptical at first because they're looking at this robust org chart and they're a team of 5, but they want to get to $1 billion and then beyond $1 billion. And they're saying, well, I don't have that complicated of an org chart. Then we always end up pushing back and say, well, you do. Just there's only 5 names. There's a bunch of them repeated, but all these tasks are getting done. Big firm, small firm. So it's important to recalibrate this stuff and sort of know what your end destination is. If you want to keep it lean and mean, own that. If you want to build the enterprise, that next empire, have your IPO, fantastic. Just don't get stuck in the middle.
I love it, David. The middle is the white death. There's nothing there.
It really is. I mean, it's part of why when you talk about going and doing like job fairs at colleges and stuff, and I've said this before because you heard me say it, and if you listen to the other podcasts, listeners, you will have heard this as well, but it's part of why the numbers of new Series 7 professionals coming into our industry isn't going up as fast or as proportional as it should be to the number exiting and aging out of our industry, because who in the world wants to come out of college with their bachelor's, or maybe they even went a little further and got their MBA? You're going to come out and the job you take is a commission-based sales job selling fill in the blank. Like, it's not vacuums or insurance necessarily anymore, but it's about as attractive to a new college grad. Like,
Yeah.
But if you can show them a career track, you can show them, a small base, a bonus and profit. We're going to train you. You're going to be able to service clients. We're going to get you licensed. We're going to get you designations. And then if you show the acumen for it, we'll move you into sort of that hunter role. If you don't, there's a whole career track here as a farmer. They have much better names for these things. Don't get me wrong, but you get the idea. That really, at the end of the day, that is going to be the future of our industry. If we don't fix the compensation, we're going to have a hell of a time getting people to come into this industry.
By the way, I think farmers and hunters are perfect titles. They just nail it right there. But how can advisors reach you, David?
So especially on this topic, watch us on social media. I said it generically. We also post, of course, Facebook, Instagram, but for the most part, it all hits, LinkedIn, because that's where us as fellow business owners, B2B, end up existing. So we always post all of our snippets, great highlights of resources there, as well as just the website. You can go to successionresource.com. We have our live chat on there. You'll be chatting with our administrative staff. They can get you set up to talk to somebody. But yeah, seek us out. We continue to push new content out, frankly, if nothing else, just to get us all collectively thinking about this stuff a little bit more often.
Listeners, follow this podcast to get David's latest insights and share with others. Get the conversation going. Thanks for being with us.
And that concludes another episode of The Fine Print from SRG. We hope you found this episode both interesting and valuable. We encourage you to check out our website at www.successionresource.com. And of course, connect with us on social media for the latest happenings here at SRG. If you just can't get enough of the fine print, we invite you to join our monthly webinar series and newsletters where we address many of the topics covered in this podcast in greater detail. Finally, if you enjoyed today's episode as much as we did recording it, please leave us a review, a good one, mind you, and tell your industry friends about us. Your support helps us continue to bring you the best content possible. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guests or individual hosts, and not necessarily the views or opinions of Succession Resource Group. Content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional advice, as amazing it might be. Always seek the advice of an expert with any questions you may have. As always, we at SRG stand ready to help when you're ready.